The painting Nude, Green Leaves and Bust by Pablo Picasso became the most expensive in the world when it was sold for $106 million in Christie's in New York in 2010. However, if you had a copy, a fake, one that looked like the original but was not the original, it would be worth a tiny fraction of that, maybe the cost of the materials required to make it, plus a bit for its aesthetic value. But what if you took all the atoms of the original and changed them for identical new atoms so that it looked exactly the same? Would it still be the same painting that Picasso painted in 1932, and would it still be worth $106 million if you knew that it had a total atom transplant? Edward Page Mitchell was an editorial short story writer for the daily newspaper called The Sun in New York City in the late 1800s. Mitchell was one of the first sci-fi writers and is now regarded as a major figure of the genre, but most of his articles were published anonymously in the newspaper instead of books, so he never became as popular as some of his contemporaries like H.G. Wells. The story The Crystal Man, written in 1881 about a man made invisible by science, was 16 years before H.G. Wells' The Invisible Man. Other works like the 1881 story The Clock That Went Backwards was the first instance of a time machine being used for time travel and the first instance of a temporal paradox, and it also predates H.G. Wells' The Time Machine by 14 years. Other stories include The Tachypomp, written in 1874 about faster-than-light travel, and The Ablest Man in the World, about a thinking computer and a cyborg, was written in 1879, but The Man Without a Body of 1877 was one of the first stories about teleportation of matter. In the popular sci-fi series Star Trek, the transporter is meant to dematerialise matter in one place, then rematerialise it elsewhere, transporting the object or person within seconds. In his book The Physics of Star Trek, Lawrence Krauss looks at how such a transporter might work in the real world. In order to dematerialise matter, the binding energy of the atoms and all the component parts, the quarks, would have to be overcome. To do this, you would have to heat the matter to 1 trillion degrees to unbind the quarks, and at that temperature, matter would lose its mass and become radiation. The amount of energy required to dematerialise a human-sized sample would be in the order of 100 megaton nuclear weapon. Now, assuming we could overcome all the problems involving quantum mechanics and make such a teleporter system that didn't vaporise the transporter, and could beam you from one point to another, even if it was 100% verbatim copy of the original, would your personality, your consciousness, your soul, your spirit, or whatever you might call you, still be you? Now, you don't actually have to wait until technology advances to pull you apart and reassemble you again. It's happening right now. The human body is an amazing self-repairing machine that, if you look after it and treat it well, will last you a lifetime. But it won't be the same as when you got it new. Well, of course it won't. It's been growing from conception, when it was just a single cell, dividing and multiplying until it's between 50 and 75 trillion cells, give or take 10 trillion here or there, and not including all the bacterial hangers-on that add around another 100 trillion to your body. It's said that your body is replaced every 7 years, but it's actually continuously being rebuilt all the time. Your organs, your blood and bones are all being gradually recycled. Each cell type in your body has its own lifespan. Red blood cells live for about 4 months, while white ones live for about a year. Bone cells for up to 20 years. Human eggs can last decades, while sperm cells and the cells lining the intestine are the mayflies of a human body, lasting just a few days. Other than stem cells, the cells which make other cells, the neurons that make up your brain can last a lifetime and maybe much longer. In research carried out by the University of Pavia in Italy, they transplanted mouse neurons into the fetuses of rats and then allowed the rats to live into old age. On examination of the rats, which have a lifespan twice that of the mice, they found the original mouse neurons were still alive and well without any neurological problems, even though they had lived over twice as long as the mice they had originally come from. The implication of this is that the neurons could have an indefinite lifespan. Maybe your brain cells could live twice as long as you do, and if that's the case, they may still be doing fine at 160 plus years old. Nature's way of making sure that your body doesn't outlive your brain, barring injury and disease. Now, this would make sense if you are the result of the complexity of all the wiring between neurons, which takes a lifetime of experience to build up. It wouldn't be a good idea to replace them on a regular basis and lose the valuable neural pathways. So if your brain is where you exist and it doesn't get replaced, then what happens when it gets damaged? In 2008, 21-year-old Tasia Sidorova from St. Petersburg was given the last rites after an accident smashed the left half of her skull. Doctors performed a hemispherectomy and removed the left half of her brain. A hemispherectomy is an operation of last resort normally carried out on someone when they suffer from debilitating seizures or brain damage. Normally it's only carried out on youngsters under 10 because the brains of children have much greater neuroplasticity and the ability to recover normal functions if the patient is young, but it has been performed on people as old as 48. Tasia wasn't expected to live, and the doctors warned her family that she would most likely be disabled for the rest of her life, however long that might be. But after 2 years, she made a remarkable recovery. She still had limited movement in her right arm and limited vision, but she has now also developed a new talent for art, which she didn't have before. John Freeman, a neurologist at the Johns Hopkins University, said that out of some of the other cases of people having half their brains removed, one went on to be a champion bowler and another a state chess champion. Brain damage like this continues to show just how little we know about the brain, let alone about what or where you are in relationship to it. If you are just a result of the complex wiring, then how can people with long established personalities and abilities recover from such dramatic damage? If you were to cut your iPhone or computer in half, then you can pretty much guarantee the only thing it will be useful for afterwards is wedging the door open. Maybe you are like the software or the algorithm and the brain is just the hardware it runs on, but with much greater redundancy abilities. But that still begs the question of where are you and can you exist without the brain? After all, software still exists when it's not running on a computer. Could you be downloaded from your brain to run in another brain-like device? Neuroscientists are 99.9% convinced that the brain is a mechanism with its approximately 86 billion neurons, each one connected to up to 10,000 other neurons. The number of the possible connections between all these could be as high as over 1,000 trillion synaptic connections. And we still don't have any idea how the mind is created by the brain, if indeed it is. One thing we can be sure of though is, just don't expect to be downloaded into your favourite virtual world and live there forever anytime soon. And as always, thanks for watching and please subscribe, rate and share.